Pandemic.
Good evening. Welcome to Pandemic. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty, but now it's exactly the way that it should be. This is the shot that we want. Good evening and welcome to Pandemic. Starting that one more time, I'm Joel Silberman. I am here tonight with Thunder Levin, the creator and writer of the Sharknado franchise, and an all-around fantastic guy. You might also know his work from Mutant Vampire Zombies from the Hood, and AE Apocalypse Earth, From the Sea, Geo Disaster, and of course, Zombie Tidal Wave. He is a fantastic writer, a great guy, a wonderful tongue-in-cheek sensibility that I don't think that you're likely to find anywhere else. Before we go to Thunder, though, I know that you had a quick sneak peek of him in our opening shot. Uh, I am going to read a quick thank you to our sponsors and acknowledgement thereof. Tonight's episode of Pandemic is brought to you by Roadmap Writers and Notes for Execs. Roadmap Writers is an online writer education platform hosted by working industry executives. If you're looking for a real-world solution to help develop, market, and sell your script, visit roadmapwriters.com to learn more. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to give better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors to writers as well, who can learn a lot about their own writing through learning about the notes giving process. Visit notesforexecs.com for more information. And so, just like that, I am absolutely thrilled. I can see some folks are tuning into the stream. I think we're almost at a minion. That's good enough. And I'm thrilled to bring on to the show Thunder Levin.
Hello, world.
How's it going, Thunder?
Well, there's a pandemic and people are dying, but I'm doing okay.
Okay, fair enough. I just turned my volume down a little bit so that we don't get too much echo on Thunder's side. If you all are having any trouble hearing me, then let me know. Thunder, if you have any trouble hearing me, let me know that too.
No, we're good.
Cool. Well, so I feel like people hear the writer of Sharknado and expect to meet a mad scientist. Are you a mad scientist?
Only when I'm writing Sharknado.
Fair enough.
Or something else that needs to mad scientist touch. I'm sort of Clark Kent to the writer of Sharknado, Superman, I guess.
Got it. Okay, I like that. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing both sides of you over the course of the evening because I know that in addition to being, a madcap guy, you're also a smart and serious guy.
If I put these on, you don't recognize me.
It's a completely different person. So I am hearing myself. I'm hearing that echo. I wasn't hearing that before the broadcast began. Is there anything else open, Thunder, on your side? Another broadcaster, is it just me?
Turn my speakers down a bit more.
Okay. I'm not hearing myself anymore, so if you're able to hear me still,
Yep.
Great. I often like to start at the end and what you're working on now, but I know what you're working on now, and I actually want more of the audience to be tuned in when we get to that part. So I want to put the pause on that, and I guess just start with what is your story? What is your background that led you to do these really zany, off-the-wall projects? And what is it within yourself that leads you to those and makes them appealing?
I was born in a log cabin my father built. I was born in New
York City.
Yeah, I was born in New York City on the Upper East Side. Lived a very normal, I think, middle-class childhood. My parents were odd enough that they named their son Thunder. So
yeah, what was up with that?
It was the 60s. These things happen. I don't know.
Right.
My mom went into labor during a thunderstorm, and things went downhill from there. So when I was a little kid, mom was a science fiction fan. Her father was a science fiction fan. When I was a little kid, One day, all my friends were talking about this great new show called Star Trek. And my mom let me stay up late to watch it. And it just kind of blew my mind. And I decided right then and there that when I grew up, I wanted to work on the Enterprise. And unfortunately, I was just old enough to understand that TV wasn't real. And that kind of bummed me out. And at the same time, the Apollo program was just landing on the moon, and that was damn primitive, and I didn't want to go into space like that. And so that just idea sort of went away until somebody, a cousin who was actually a professional cameraman, gave me a book called The Making of Star Trek, and it was really kind of dry. A book way beyond, a little 6-year-old's interest level. So I went to the picture section, and one of the pictures in The Making of Star Trek is these studio technicians working on the bridge of the Enterprise. And I've told the story before, but something.
No, I know.
Something clicked in my head, and it said, there is a way I can work on the Enterprise. And so that's sort of where the seed was planted. And then in 1977, I went to this movie that sort of changed the world and changed my understanding of what movies could be.
Saturday Night Fever, I assume?
No. To this day, I've never seen all of Saturday Night Fever. No, a movie called Star Wars. And it just kind of blew my mind. And back in the early 70s, movies were very serious, and they weren't connecting with me for the most part. I mean, even the comedies had to have a message. But then Star Wars came out, and suddenly it's like, oh, look, you can have fun in the theater. And so that was a big thing for me. And then in high school, we had a TV production class that I took, and that was great. And then the next year, there was no advanced TV production. So me and a couple of my friends did an independent study, and we did an hour-long Star Trek spoof called Star Wreck, the videotape. And that was like a whole production. I mean, there were only 4 or 5 of us. But it was structured like a real TV production to a certain extent. I mean, we used classrooms with desks for the helm station of the Enterprise, and we had a file cabinet for the turbo lift that somebody would have to stand inside the file cabinet until it was their cue, and then they'd push the doors open and they'd come out. But the whole process of writing the script and figuring out the sets and building props and working it all out gave me a taste for what production was like, and it was the best I've ever done. And I worked on some of the stage shows. I did musical theater in high school and then college, and I went to film school, and thought, this is what I want to do. I want to make movies. And I don't know, the tongue-in-cheek stuff, I guess it sort of started with Star Wreck, and that was always just sort of part of what I did. It's like I sort of saw the humor in what other people did. Certainly didn't see the humor in what I did.
Right.
And so I just I played with that, and when it came time to make my first feature, we had very little money. And I figured some of it was probably going to end up looking kind of cheesy, and people might laugh, and it would be better to have them laugh with us than at us. And so I took a script. It was originally Restless Dad. It was zombie.
Originally what? Say that again.
Sorry?
Say that again one more time. It was what?
Oh, it was originally called Restless Dead. And it was zombies and gangs in a warehouse. And collaborator had, he and I had sort of put the story together, but then he'd written most of the script. And I read his first draft, and I thought, well, I've seen this, but what if it had a social message, and what if it was funny? And so I sort of went through the script and poked fun at itself, and at the same time gave it a kind of social awareness within that humor. I made a film called Mutant Vampire Zombies from the Hood. And
then everything
just sort of fell into place after that. The guys at the asylum saw that, and they hired me to write something not tongue-in-cheek. And then I made another film for them that was also not tongue-in-cheek, although the visual effects, when they were finally added, were kind of campy, and they weren't supposed to be. So that kind of hurt a bit. But anyhow, they were real happy with that film, a movie called American Warships, which was a Sci-Fi Channel movie. And so they had this movie called Sharkstorm that they want. I'm skipping a lot of stuff here, but see, the short version of the story is they had a movie called Sharkstorm that they wanted to make, and I said no. Why haven't we seen enough shark movies and enough storm movies, and we don't have the budget to do something like that really well? And so they said, fine, we'll find somebody else to do it.
But then you did end up doing it.
Well, what happened then was the guys at the asylum had a meeting with the Sci-Fi Channel and pitched them on a movie called Sharkstorm. And the guys at the Sci-Fi Channel said, well, fine, whatever, but call it Sharknado. And they came back to me and they said, forget Sharkstorm, now it's called Sharknado. And I said, what do sharks have to do with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Because I heard Sharknado. I was imagining sharks fighting the army in Europe or something. I couldn't quite figure out how I was going to do that. They said, no, Sharknado, a tornado of sharks. And I said, well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. And as long as I can play it that way, then hell yeah, I'll do that, because that sounds like fun. And they said, yeah, we recognize that a movie called Sharknado will have to be a little crazy. And I said, good. And the rest is history.
Wow. So I didn't actually remember that genesis. That I love the Sharknado. We've got a comment here. I want to see Sharknado, the North Atlantic Treaty version. I can just imagine, like, you've got the Secretary General, and it's really, I think it's like Finding Nemo meets The West Wing is how I imagine Sharknado. But that's fun that you get brought back in when they know.
I gotta think about that for a minute, because I think there has to be a little like Patton in there too, or
maybe, yeah,
Fury or Dunkirk.
Yeah, it's Dunkirk, but this time it's under the water.
Why? Sharks in the water? That doesn't make sense.
That's a good point. Sharks are always much better on land. So it's fun that they come back to you when they realize that this is going to be a bit of a nutty project and say, actually, I know that you already passed, but you've got to do this nutty thing. And I also like that you come to the kind of off-the-wall, tongue-in-cheek stuff initially as a way of just recognizing your own limitations of what you had available to you, of saying, well, it's going to be like either they can laugh with us or they can laugh at us, and say, well, it's better for them to be laughing with us.
I was a very Alamo fan in high school, so I know all about being laughed at, and it's no fun. So it's better to get people to laugh with you.
Right. Well, especially if you, one way or another, have the confidence or the wherewithal to laugh at yourself, which I think a lot of people find very disarming, and frankly, a lot of writers just aren't willing to do, including writers that would seem to be very good humored and so forth. They want deep down desperately to be taken seriously as auteurs and think that somehow making fun of themselves is not going to be compatible with that.
Well, I'd like to do both. I'd like to be taken seriously, and I'd like to be an auteur. And when we get to talking about new projects, I'm actually developing two things at the same time, and one of them is very serious, um, and the other one is not.
Right. Well, you and I have discussed how the not serious. I was reminded when you were talking about Star Wars in 1977 and how so much of the cinema of the 70s was so serious and so self-important, and that then Star Wars comes out, and part of the reason that it explodes is because it's just next level fun.
Right.
And I've thought a lot, especially with TV, because TV now is the medium where everything is so serious. Even the comedies, you've got comedies that it's like, well, it's just a drama with lower stakes. It's not actually funny. It's not like a laughing comedy, you know what I mean? It's like a comedy that's meant to make you think about, I don't know, how awful the world is, which isn't that funny. And so then I think about what comes next, and I've told you this, but I want to say it on the air. I genuinely think that the thing that lights the world on fire next will be bonkers. Like it will be more Sharknado than it will be Game of Thrones, most likely, because our world, like who wants to watch something that's grounded in this mess, right? Like better to have something really fun and off the wall. And I don't know if that's going to be next year, next month, uh, years from now. But I really think that the world is just itching for something that slaps them across the face and says, "This is fun in a way that you haven't had it before."
Well, I mean, that's why Sharknado blew up the way it did,
Yeah,
because we didn't take ourselves too seriously. We were in on the joke. The audience was in on the joke. Everyone except the characters was in on the joke. And when you get to have an inside joke that you can share with everybody, that's a powerful thing. People love to be on the inside.
right. And so, talk me through the crafting of that and how you end up writing that, and then how people start talking about it and the run up to it, and it just explodes out of the gate when it finally comes out as, oh wow, we have our first troll. This is exciting.
What are they saying? I don't have my glasses on.
Somebody just asked, Dudek the Pole TV asked, how big is your cock? Which is going to get him banned from this chat room. But we've never had somebody just come in and troll us before, and that's fun.
And the great thing about this is that, the picture's cut off about here, so we can make up anything we want.
Absolutely. My understanding is that Thunder is wearing no pants, no underwear. It is just, business up top, party at the bottom right now.
During the Sharknado insanity, I did an interview like this, and I'd been doing so many of these interviews, and I'd sort of gotten lackadaisical about it. And indeed, I was doing an interview where I was properly dressed from the waist up and was just wearing boxers below. And it was summer; it was hot, and something happened in the middle of the interview, and I had to stand up and reach for something. I think maybe to shut the phone off, because I hadn't shut the phone off, and it was me during the interview. And I got about this far, and I realized, oh, I shouldn't do that. So it could happen, but not today.
Cool. Well, I feel like we've all gotten a little bit more sensitive to being on screen and off. And yes, Rhino M, we are talking about movie making. So, in the spirit of talking about movie making, talk through the process of having something explode like that while Tasha goes and pulls some of the trolls out.
Um, do you want me to talk about the explosion process or about the writing process?
Well, yeah, let's start with the writing process and then we can talk about the explosion.
Okay.
Because because I'm curious how much of it during the writing process, what were there any hints as you were writing it that it was going to end up becoming what it did?
Well, naturally, when I'm writing, I expect everything to, take over the world. Honestly, the way I approached it was not writing a farce. The way I approached it structurally and character-wise was to create a traditional disaster film. And the real difference was simply that I didn't have to worry about going too far. I didn't have to worry about things being over the top.
Right.
And I just let myself have fun with it. If I wanted to make a pop culture reference or a Jaws reference or a Star Wars reference, I let myself do it because that was the nature of the beast. I was doing something that was so silly that I got to be silly with the process. But structurally, it's still a traditional disaster film. And it was not farce. It had to have characters that you cared about and that you would follow from point A to point B to point C. You can only play the joke, oh no, sharks falling from the sky. That's only going to hold an audience for a few minutes.
Right.
There have to be characters that they're willing to follow along with. And so Finn and Nova were very important to set up early on as being characters that we could enjoy watching no matter what happened. And Finn was very much the everyman hero. He just wanted his family, and Nova was the archetypal kick-ass, strong female character. And in the original conception, Finn's wife April was a genuinely aggrieved ex-spouse who was still a very sympathetic character. In point of fact, when I was writing it, it was supposed to kind of be a love letter to my ex that showed that even after a long time, these two characters could come together and really work together and rediscover what they had once upon a time. And then Anthony and Tara Reid got cast, and she and Anthony took a slightly different approach to the character, and she got a little bitchier. That was not my original intent for her character. But the point was that, create these characters who are interesting to watch, and then put them in this insane situation, and think to yourself, what would I do if I found myself in a tornado of sharks? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Finn is me. Finn is a more rugged, better looking, in better shape version of me. And I've been preparing for the apocalypse since I was a teenager and read a book called Lucifer's Hammer. So I have a bug out bag in my car. So when Finn is confronted with a situation where he needs a climbing rig, I figure he's prepared. He's got that in his car. It's okay. But basically, what would I do if Los Angeles was hit by a hurricane and the streets flooded and sharks were falling from the sky? And well, what do you do? Well, you get a chainsaw is the first thing you do, because lightsabers don't really exist. And what's going to be the most effective way to deal with a flying shark? And I don't know. I figured machine guns would be harder to find than a chainsaw. So
I feel like it's a little bit different if it hits a different state. There's some states where the machine guns might be more plentiful than they are on the streets of Los Angeles.
Well, that was a joke we did in Sharknado 2. In New York City, you can't buy a chainsaw in the city. No hardware store in New York City carries chainsaws. You have to go to Long Island or Jersey. And so we made a joke about that.
That's funny. I didn't remember that.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of played with that.
Well, I think that there's something really important there that's universal for writing, which is that in order for something to work, it has to have really grounded character stakes. It has to have, as came up in a conversation that we had on Wednesday night with one of the writers from Jack Ryan and some other more conventional dramas, it has to be character, goal, obstacle. And you have to have a character that you care about trying to get something and something standing in their way. And it doesn't matter what's going on around them. If they want something and there are obstacles and you identify with them, you'll stick with them. And part of, I think, the genius of the Sharknado franchise is that the humor is coming straight out of us simultaneously knowing that we are rooting for characters and we are rooting through situations that are absurd, but still finding ourselves invested anyway and having that dual consciousness as we
Right.
watch.
That was part of what I really tried to do, and it got progressively harder as the movies went along. But what I really tried to do was keep everything that happened at least theoretically possible. And I maintain that if you go through the movies, everything in Sharknado for the first three is at least theoretically possible until the shark's in space in number three. You know, and then by then we'd sort of give it up. And yeah.
By then, the sharks have jumped the shark.
Right. But we did something that that Aaron Sorkin talks about, is that if you're gonna do something that you know is a little iffy, point it out yourself. So as soon as we had the sharks in space, April, Tara Reid's character, yells, "How do they survive in space?" And Finn yells, "How do they survive in a tornado?" And then we're through. We've addressed the elephant in the room, and we can just continue with our insanity. So it's funny that Sharknado really does adhere to most of the rules of dramatic writing, except that you can never go too far.
Right.
Right.
I
I mean,
remember.
all drama can be boiled down to a likable character overcomes great odds to achieve a worthwhile goal. As long as you can identify what all the elements in that phrase are in your story, you're halfway there. And if you can't figure out that phrase, you have a problem.
Say the phrase again, because you
A
might have cut
likable,
out slightly. I'm not sure if it's just on my ear or in the whole thing.
a likable character overcomes great odds to achieve a worthwhile goal.
Yeah. That is the more eloquent version of my buddy and my protagonist goal obstacle.
Yeah. You see, I never studied. Now we're going to get some trolls responding to this statement, but I never studied screenwriting. I always wanted to be a director. That's mostly what I did. It's just a happenstance that I withdrew from directing Sharknado because I was attached to direct it. I withdrew to direct another film, and then that was the project that blew up. And so suddenly I'm known as a writer, but I was always a director first. And I never really studied screenwriting. I took one screenwriting course in college. And the rest of it is just sort of, absorbing stuff from watching movies and reading and what have you. So the whole character goal obstacle or whatever you just said, I'm sure that's in a textbook somewhere. I'm sure that's in Save the Cat or Truby or McKee or something. But I've never read any of those books. So I don't know that phraseology. I just know what I have to put in a story to make it make sense.
Right. Well, you stumbled upon the universal formula, and I know that it's universal because, as regular viewers here know, it's what I teach to fifth graders to get them to understand the basics of a story, and it always works. So, on that note, I'm going to do a quick sponsorship break for those who are new and tuning in. And by the way, Thunder, the one trolley talking about his dick guy is gone, and we've now got just some new viewers who seem to have come to check out you, which is cool.
Maybe
So
look
I'm
comments while you're doing your sponsor notice.
yes. So I'm going to go and do a sponsor notice. You see that now Thunder has his glasses on. That means that he's one of his alter egos. I don't know which one. And I'm going to hop over here into the single frame. And even this time, for regular viewers, remember to put the banners on to like, follow, share, and subscribe if you like what you see here, because we have a lot of fun and a lot of interesting conversations with some great writers. Tonight's episode of Pandemic is brought to you by Roadmap Writers. Roadmap is a screenwriting education platform for writers who are looking for a guided path to success. Programs are hosted online by working industry executives and are designed to empower writers with actionable tools to elevate their craft and cultivate industry relationships. Since 2016, Roadmap has helped more than 118 writers sign to representation, and many others get staffed, optioned, or sell their script. I read through that kind of fast, but again, regular viewers may notice that is 118 now, which is up from 115 at the beginning of the week. They are on a bit of a tear. So, just a testament to going to roadmapwriters.com and using the code pandemic to save $15 and get started with them. Roadmap Writers, the road to your screenwriting success starts here. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to give better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors to writers as well, who can learn a lot about their own writing through learning about the notes giving process. Visit notesforexecs.com for more information. And so I am eager to ask some of the questions from the audience as we bring back Thunder. But first, before we do that, and Tasha, if you can go and grab any of the better or best questions for us.
There is one I'd like to address, but go ahead.
Well, so I love what we just talked about grounding these larger than life, so to speak, stories in real character stakes. The reaction, though, I want to talk about a little bit because it too was larger than life. I can't think of much of anything else that had that kind of social media explosion and popular perception explosion that you had with this movie. And I would love to hear what that looked and felt like from your perspective.
It was
as the storm comes in, as it were.
I'm sorry?
As the storm comes in, as it were.
Thank you. It was surreal. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And that kind of ties into to a question here from Mike Rinaldi. Was Sharknado the first movie to popularize filmmakers live tweeting during its TV broadcast? And that all ties in together. It was insane. I had done a live tweet the year before for my movie American Warships when that premiered on Sci-Fi. And we had like 100 people maybe tweeting at us, and most of them were saying you suck, and a few were asking intelligent questions, and it was just a little value added thing, and I think people had been doing that for several years at least. But with Sharknado, there was buzz starting a while before, I guess, since the first trailer was released on Sci-Fi. There was actually months before a website had covered the American film market where the Sharknado poster debuted. And they had said the asylum wins the internet today with this poster, and they posted the Sharknado poster, and that sort of started it a little bit in the background. But then when the first trailer came out, it just struck a nerve, and people started talking about it. And a few days before the premiere, I guess it was July 4th weekend, I had friends from opposite ends of the country tell me that they had been at July 4th parties, and people were talking about this movie that was going to be coming out called Sharknado. And I was just kind of amazed. You sure they're Sharknado? They said that. Um, and so when it blew up on Twitter that night, I mean, we were expecting something. There had been enough buzz. We'd done a few interviews. I did a very funny interview for IO9 where they asked very serious questions about Sharknado, and I gave them very serious answers, completely tongue in cheek. And that interview got picked up by a bunch of other media, and there was a lot of great reader comments coming back about it. And so we were expecting that people would be watching more than perhaps the regular sci-fi original movie. But there was no way we could have anticipated quite the reaction it had. During the original airing, the Sharknado hashtag was generating 5,000 tweets a minute. And apparently that's more than the Red Wedding. That's more than, I don't know, anything basically, up until that point. And so, I'm sitting there watching the movie, trying to live tweet, and you couldn't get a comment in edgewise because every time you hit refresh, it was just 100 new comments every second almost, it seemed like. And there was no way to respond. I went in thinking we were going to have 100 people telling us how bad we sucked. And I had tongue-in-cheek answers ready for some of that. But that's what it was. Everybody just sort of immediately got what we were doing. They got the sense of fun, and they started playing along. And then when the celebrities started tweeting, I think Mia Farrow maybe was the first. She tweeted that she and Philip Roth were watching Sharknado. And then a bunch of others. I know Patton Oswalt really got into it, and Elizabeth Banks, and I don't know. The list just went on. And then for me, the big thing was when what's his name? This is bad. I shouldn't forget his name. The co-producer of Law, Damon Lindelof.
Damon Lindelof, I remember.
Tweeted that he was going to write a sequel to Sharknado and have the script done before Sharknado was off the air. And he had just done a rewrite for the Alien prequel,
Prometheus,
which a friend of mine, John Spates, had written Prometheus. And then at sort of the last minute before they went into production, the head of Fox said, this shouldn't be a direct prequel to Alien. It should be sort of a standalone movie. And so Damon Lindelof came in and did a rewrite to make it sort of a standalone movie. And so when he tweeted this, I said, well, I hope you will let me work on this sequel with you. But really, I think it should be a prequel, only not quite. And Damon Lindelof replied, touche, and that just made my night. And then the next morning, the phone was ringing off the hook. My email, I had like 100 emails requesting interviews. It was just amazing. And I was on CNN the next day. And that weekend, it aired on a Thursday. And I was on CNN the next day, and MSNBC and HuffPost Live. And that weekend, I shot a segment for Good Morning America, which aired the next Monday. And stuff like this doesn't happen. It was just amazing. And that was the summer that there were a lot of big budget tentpole movies that were flops. Like that was the year that the Johnny Depp Lone Ranger movie came out, like a bunch of others. And I think the audience was kind of tired of being told what to go see, of being told this is the next big thing. Sharknado came along, and they were able to sort of find it for themselves and invent their own blockbuster that they could claim and say, we made this. and that's what it was. I mean, there was no marketing to speak of. There was a trailer and a few interviews that people caught on to before it came out, and it really was an audience-driven phenomenon. I talk about it now. A lot of people in the industry don't take Sharknado seriously, as to, you should never take Sharknado seriously.
Right.
But what we accomplished from a business standpoint, you should take seriously, because Sharknado was probably the only original movie franchise. We on 6 movies altogether. The only other franchise that's done that in the last 20 years maybe is Fast and the Furious, and I guess some of the lower budget horror films. But outside of horror, we're pretty much the only original franchise in the last 20 years other than Fast and the Furious. And I think that's something worth paying attention to.
I think so too. And I think that people would have, if you had in the later versions done slightly bigger budget iterations and put them in theaters, people would have showed up in droves. Now, obviously, for the Asylum, they were making plenty of money with making them direct for television, syndicating them around the world, etc. So I certainly understand why they didn't go that route. But
there's I mean, hindsight is 2020. But there was talk of it at the time, of doing a theatrical for number 2. And part of the issue with that not happening was that then Sci-Fi would have lost it. It would have become a Universal movie, and Sci-Fi didn't want that to happen. They had the goose that laid the golden egg, as far as they were concerned, and so there was pushback on that end. They wanted to hang on to it. The Asylum, of course, had no experience with big budget movies, and the Asylum formula, might not have worked, and it would have been a huge gamble for them. So it was talked about, but and I wish we had done that, because I'd have a big house now. But yeah, in retrospect, I wish we had done that, and I think maybe, I don't know. I think maybe the Asylum might wish that too.
yeah, I think you're right. I think that they would be foolish not to wish that. I mean, it could have launched them into a whole other category, and a very profitable category of tentpoles.
But from their standpoint, a very risky one, because
Yes.
the Asylum has never lost money on a movie.
Right.
And they keep on chugging along, doing what they do. And you can debate the merits of what they do, but obviously there are enough people out there who like what they do to keep them in business. So they would have been, risking everything on one shot, and I guess it was not clear it would pay off. And of course, Sharknado 2 went on to break the Sci-Fi ratings record, but that was 4 million people watching it for free. How many of those people would have showed up to spend $15 in the theater? We don't know. We'll never know. I think it would have worked, but I might not be a neutral observer.
Of course. Well, so that does raise the question now, and I'm seeing so many comments here. People, I was putting them up on screen as you were talking, who were saying that they love this story. They love, this, and I love this story, and how it just takes everybody by storm. And I think it's so foolish that so many taken by storm. I realize, okay, it's so foolish to me that nobody has tried to take what worked for Sharknado and put it into a bigger budget context in making tent poles, that nobody has tried to take that to. What's that?
Maybe you and I should do that.
That is my fervent hope. And I'll get to that in just a second. I do want to offer up a couple questions from the audience. So just a little bit of order of operations from here, where we go from here, because I want people to know that I am seeing your questions. So Sean Galt wants to know. So I'm going to answer Sean's question, and then I'm going to ask you, Thunder, about the projects you're working on now and the things that hopefully, fingers crossed, in a dream post-COVID world, we work on together. And then I want to close Deeks247 with your question. I don't know if Deeks is still here anymore. We may have lost our little stream or Twitch stream fandom that we momentarily seem to have there.
There's a good question. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll just sit here and answer what you say.
Yes. So Sean wants to know, were there any scenes you wrote that were so outrageous that the director said, no, that's too far?
So originally I was supposed to direct Sharknado. I ended up choosing, I had another film that I had written. It was scheduled at the same time. And so I had to choose. And I had already done one tongue-in-cheek disaster film, Mutant Vampire Zombies from the Hood, which is available on Amazon streaming. And so I chose to direct this other film called AE, Apocalypse Earth, which was a more serious science fiction film. So I was off in the jungles of Costa Rica shooting AE when Anthony Ferrante was directing Sharknado in Los Angeles. So he and I never communicated. We never met until we were both at the asylum editing our respective films. So there was never a scene that he said, no, that's going too far. But what did happen during the development process was that the asylum and execs at the asylum, execs at Sci-Fi, there was some pushback about whether Nova should be inside the same shark that Finn goes into at the end and cuts his way out. If it was just a bridge too far for once he cuts his way out of the shark to reach back in and pull Nova out too. And my response to that was, it's called Sharknado. We really can't go too far. And thank God everyone sort of saw the wisdom in that, because to me that's the best part of the first movie.
And now I agree with that.
I should say that that when I handed in the first draft of Sharknado, the asylum, even though they said this should be crazy, their studio creed is that they don't do farce, they don't do tongue-in-cheek. They play everything straight, and they were having trouble getting out of that mindset. So when I turned in the first draft of Sharknado, I got it back with a big note that said, this is not a fucking comedy. And they actually made me go through and take out all the funny stuff. And I said, look, you guys are paying the bills. I will do what you tell me. But if Sci-Fi comes back and says this should be funnier, I'm getting a big cartoon hammer and I'm hitting you all over the head with it. And so naturally, I went through and I took out all the funny stuff, and they sent it off to Sci-Fi, and Sci-Fi said, well, this is great, but it should be funnier. And so I had my moment of vindication. I went back and put the funny stuff back in, and it created some more. And you know, then the rest is history. But there was that sort of momentary, is this getting out of hand, hesitation from everyone but me, and I assume from the director, because I never, you know, he changed some stuff when he shot it, but basically he changed stuff to accommodate production realities, because I had written a $100 million film. One of the other reasons I sort of chose the other movie was that I'd written a $100 million film, and I had an idea how I could do it for 20 million, but I wasn't really sure how I could do it for 1 million. And so fortunately, as the writer, I never had to deal with that. And so he made some changes to accommodate the budget. And then he changed the order of some things, which I still don't understand. But he kept my scenes. He just sort of moved them around a little bit. But you know, as far as I could tell, and as far as any conversation I've ever had with him in the years since, there was nothing in there that he ever said, "Whoa, that's going too far."
Right. Well, so that segues pretty nicely then, or as nicely as anything, I guess, to what you're working on now and how you're approaching it. You've had this experience. You go on and you make. I realize you didn't write all of them, but you write 4 out of the or 3 of the next of the Sharknado sequels, so 4 total, and then you know, there's 2 more, and by that point you'd moved on. Now you're working on stuff, and especially I know that you have a more grounded, serious project, but I'm curious for your out of this world project that I'm such a fan of, and how you approach that, and how you try and sell something that it seems is hilarious and doesn't fit into any box.
Yeah, well, that's proving to be a bit of a problem.
I mean, same with Sharknado, by the way.
Right. I mean, Sharknado happened because a couple of execs at Sci-Fi heard the word Sharknado in another movie and said, we should make that movie. And Sci-Fi, you know, had done campy disaster films. So they were okay in that space. Nobody else does that as a business model. And Sci-Fi has actually since then has tried to get out of that business model. In fact, during the whole run of Sharknado, Sci-Fi was trying to get out of that business model. And a lot of the execs there were very frustrated. We were sort of the ugly stepchild at Sci-Fi, because they wanted to get back to the glory days of Battlestar Galactica. But the most successful thing they had was pro wrestling and Sharknado. And so there was this great tension about what to do about that. And it caused some friction, I think. But yeah, nobody does camp right now. There have been some attempts. There was an effort last year, I think, to reboot Buckaroo Banzai with Kevin Smith as the showrunner. And I guess there's Avenue 5 on HBO, which is campy science fiction, sort of.
Even that seems to me to be striving on some level to be taken seriously.
Yeah. Nobody really does this just batshit crazy fun stuff. And it's a shame. And it's making it hard to sell my next project, which is called Deadbeard, the zombie pirate rock musical.
Like, that's all I need to hear, but please tell us more.
Well, no, seriously, I go into a room to pitch this, and I say, it's called Deadbeard, the zombie pirate rock musical. And people fall down laughing. And I want to see that movie. I think there's one. I've pitched it to dozens of development execs, and there's only one who hasn't had the exact same reaction. I love it. That's great. I want to see that movie. I don't know how to sell it.
Right.
Every single one has said exactly the same thing. And so we've come to the conclusion that we have to finance it independently and show people a finished film and let them see it with an audience. And suddenly they will say, yes, of course. And then they will pay us lots of money. Because everybody has the same reaction to it. It's just great, ridiculous fun. Yeah, I almost don't need to pitch the story. It's almost irrelevant. I mean, there is a story, and it's as batshit crazy as the title implies. But there are zombie pirates, and there's a curse, and there's a descendant of a famous pirate in modern day, and there's time travel, and there's sacrifices, and there's swashbuckling, and basically it's every zombie movie trope, every pirate movie trope, every movie musical trope, and a dash of Sharknado all rolled into one until it explodes on the screen. And how anybody could think that this won't sell is beyond me, because it's just fun. There's just no other way to put it. It's just fun, and isn't that why we go to the movies? So that's one of the two projects I'm working on.
And I love that project, and the reason that, like, those who've been watching the whole episode may have noticed that Thunder and I keep like winkingly talking about this is because one of my little side hustles is that I'm trying to raise a film fund, have the first dollars of it, but like not enough to make a bunch of movies yet. But this is like the number one project that is not mine that I want to make because it
Somehow
is.
I convince you to make it the number one project, even if it is yours.
Well, I should say, as I mentioned to you, the project that is mine is the one that I have to do that in order to get the rest of the fun. But that's a whole other.
I like the story.
Indeed, that's a whole other conversation. But this is just so fun, so obvious to me, as like, yes, this is a hit waiting to happen, and franchise waiting to happen, and there's so much that can be done with this once it goes. But it has been amazing for me to see because I sent it to a few producers that I'm friends with too, and their immediate response was exactly Thunder as you described. This is hilarious. I want to see this happen. We don't have a mandate for this. And, you have to remember that these funds, and I know that you know this, I'm talking about the audience, these kinds of funds, and this affects a little bit what you write, uh, especially right now for features. They have very strict guidelines of what they can and can't greenlight because they have targets that they're supposed to hit and that their investors expect them to hit. And so it's, well, we make horror movies that are under $10 million. We make comedy movies that are under $20 million and have X number of stars attached. We make yada, 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 all of these very specific kinds of things. And Deadbeard, the zombie pirate musical, doesn't fit into any of those. And that, to me, is a blind spot in the industry, which from a business standpoint, that can be exploited because the person that figures out, like, Star Wars was considered a huge gamble. It was considered a huge gamble. This is crazy. Maybe he can pull it off, maybe he can't. And then, of course, it ends up becoming Star Wars, and it ends up changing what all of the blockbusters are after it. But it really is, when you're doing a paradigm shift, you have to trust that usually something that worked in a micro budget space, like Star Wars was. Star Wars was a bigger budget version of stuff that had worked in the micro budget space. And say stuff that's worked in that space could work on a larger scale. So
yeah, and if you look at Sharknado, if you look at its success, it was a 4-quadrant movie. Little kids loved it. College people loved it. The mainstream adult audience loved it, and even senior citizens loved it. My mother-in-law is a big Sharknado fan, and she's not very happy with me right now, and she's still a Sharknado fan. So I don't really understand the resistance, but we will overcome it. Even if we have to finance it independently and take it to Sundance and let distribution execs see it with an audience.
I 100% agree. To me, there is no way you show this with an audience at Sundance, having been to Sundance, and I'm assuming you have too, where that audience doesn't flip out for this.
Yeah, right. I've never been. I keep wanting to go, and somehow it doesn't happen.
It is very cold. It's really,
Well,
really.
I don't mind that. I like playing in the snow, so it's just going
I
all.
don't, but my dad's roommate from college lives there, and he's functionally an uncle to me, and so I have a free place to stay when I go, and
Yeah,
that makes it a lot easier.
that helps too. Yeah.
Well, so do you want to talk about the other project you're working on that's like less tongue-in-cheek?
I would like to talk about it very much.
Cool.
It
So
is.
talk about that, and then I'll ask the closing question from Deeks.
So my serious project is called Star Child. It is a science fiction thriller about a mother trying to protect her genetically engineered daughter from a military team that's trying to capture her and bring her back to be used as a weapon. It's something else that we're trying to put together independent financing for. It's probably like a $10 to $15 million film. I'm hoping to get Evangeline Lilly in the lead. And it's a very gritty, intense, dark science fiction thriller. It's about this woman who is driven basically through hell. It's basically how she has to descend through hell, kind of level by level, in order to come out the other side and save her daughter. And it's about what we do for love. It's about the power of love and what that means for free will. And so, as you can see, it's very pretentious and very not Sharknado.
Right. But also heartfelt. And is it coming from, is there a specific inspiration for you that made you want to do this project that might be a little bit different than what people have seen from you before?
Well, Sharknado is the inspiration because I have, the tongue-in-cheek thing is just a part of me. And growing up a Star Trek fan, and that's why I got into the business, I want to do serious science fiction and action adventure. I mean, not serious as in dark and depressing, but serious as in not tongue-in-cheek. Intense, um, genuine emotion, action, thrills, spills, adventure. Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Aliens. These are my touchstones. Even Blade Runner.
Hmm.
Um, and so this is a step to get to that while not abandoning the Sharknado fans or that side of what I enjoy doing. I'm hoping to craft a career now where I can do both. We'll see if Hollywood will let me do that, and if not, I'll have to force the bitch to her knees. But yeah, I'm hoping to find a way to do both, and then if Star Child works, I have a TV series that I want to sell called Meth Gators, which is
Meth Gators?
Meth Gators, which is interesting in that it does both at the same time. It's sort of a quirky character drama and a Sharknado-esque horror thriller at the same time. And I'm hoping I can pull that off. And then eventually it all leads to this science fiction epic that I've been developing since 1990 called 2176. And if I get that on the air as a Game of Thrones level TV series and it runs for 7 seasons, then I can retire to a beach in the South Pacific.
But only if you get that as well.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I feel like I should clarify because I know you that when you talk about making somebody take the knee, you're talking about the Game of Thrones take the knee, not another kind of take the knee.
Well, we're talking about Hollywood, so you can go whatever way you like to take that.
Fair enough. For your sake, it's definitely the Game of Thrones taking the knee.
It was a euphemism.
Fair. And so I guess I want to end with a kind of puff question, which is just you've talked about your favorite TV show. What is your favorite movie? What is the movie that's core to you? This is from Deeks247.
If you take the Lord of the Rings trilogy and think of it as one movie, that
Which
has
it
become,
is.
which it is, that has become my favorite movie. But because it was released as three, I wouldn't pick one of those as my favorite movie. If I had to pick a single theatrical release, it would be a tie between Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
So basically, George Lucas needs to partner with you to produce Deadbeard, and it would be better than anything that he's done in 20 plus years.
Sure. Okay.
Cool. So George, if you're watching,
George Lucas can partner with me to produce any of my films, and I'll be very happy.
Great.
I'm not going to let him write and direct them because I haven't been thrilled with what he's done lately. But if he wants to produce any of my films, I will sign up right now.
Yes, and if anybody who's watching finds any of these ideas really interesting and also happens to be really rich, let us know. We're trying to make, especially me, am especially interested in making Deadbeard independently. So let us know. And with that, I think I shall thank you very much for coming on
Well, thank you
and for
for
talking
having me.
about these things. And I really do believe that Sharknado and its ilk are the future. I really do. So
Let's hope you're right. Let's make it happen, even if you're not.
that's right, one way or another. So thanks so much for coming on, Thunder.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Joel.
Cool. And that is our last show for this week. We will be doing an episode, or at least having a new episode coming up on Memorial Day. It's not yet clear whether we're going to be doing it live or posting it, pre-recording it and then posting it. It's just going to depend on what our guest, David Rosen, and his family situation for Memorial Day looks like. He's got a couple young kids. You would know David for his work on Hunters, which is how I know him, and also on the show that he created, I Just Want My Pants Back. He's also working on some major film franchises that I'm not 100% sure if I can talk about or which of them that I can talk about. So I'll leave that for hyping on Monday. And then there is a major change next week. We're going to be going down to twice a week. I know we were 5, and then we were 3, and now it's going to be twice because, as some of you know, I sold a movie, and it's taken a lot of time for me to write that. And Tasha has a cool new job working on The Good Doctor. So uh, we're going to be continuing to do this show on Mondays and Thursdays, see how that works. Those have been traditionally our biggest nights. And I hope that you all come back and see us then. I'm sorry to keep switching the schedule around on you, but we'll have lots of stuff up all over our social media saying Mondays and Thursdays. And our first Thursday interview for this new twice a week will be me. I'm getting interviewed. And so all of those questions that you've just wanted to ask me, you can ask me. And I'll have my friend Kate Van Devender, who was our first beta test interviewee way back at the very, very beginning of this. She's going to come on and she is going to be the guest host and interview me. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And that will be Thursday, not a week from tonight, 6 days from tonight, the 28th, Thursday the 28th. So I'll see you on Memorial Day, and then I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks as always for tuning in, and thank you to our sponsors, Turn On Banner, the note says to myself. Thank you to our sponsors, Roadmap Writers and Roadmap Writers and Notes for Execs for sponsoring Pandemic. Roadmap Writers is an online writer education platform hosted by working industry executives. If you're looking for a real-world solution to help develop, market, and sell your script, visit roadmapwriters.com to learn more. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to get better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors as well to writers who can learn a lot about their own writing through the notes giving process. I will see you next week. As always, thank you so much to Tasha Cerny, our producer. Thank you to Brian Lynch And we will hit you with those closing credits and see you next week.
Pandemic.